And it is another great one for Black Belts and Boardrooms. Man, I've been excited about this episode for weeks now. I got to talk to Nikki a couple of weeks ago, still kept up with her. And, I told Amir about it. I was like, man, I told my wife about it, etc. I was like, man, very, very excited about this one, especially when you get into the age that we're in around AI, etc. This is the person that you want to talk to. Amir, who do we have on the podcast today?
Oh my gosh, Renard. I am probably just as excited as you are about our guest today. She is no stranger to digital transformation, absolutely big in the space of AI and more importantly, the human side of AI. And I'm excited to get into that conversation with our guest today. And our guest today is none other than Nikki Barua. Nikki, welcome to the show.
I'm so excited to be here with you both. Thank you for inviting me.
Glad you could make time for us. So, Nikki, a softball, to start out with. Tell us a little bit about your origin story. Now, you can get as deep into it as you want. You can go as wide as you want. We'll leave it up to you. But tell us a little bit about who Nikki Barua is, so that we get a feel of the person that you are.
Nikki is a dreamer and a very big doer. I was born and raised in India, and right from a very young age, I always had these really big dreams, and it was kind of unique at that time. I grew up in the 70s and 80s, at a time where women did not have big careers and frankly not a lot of freedom either, right? So young girls went to school to be qualified as a suitable bride and end up getting married and raising a family. And I just believed that I was meant for something different. And I was fortunate to have a very supportive family. And I believe that America was a place where all those dreams would come true. And so at the age of 21, I left home and, got a one-way flight ticket to America, not a whole lot of money, and a suitcase full of really unfashionable clothes, and made my way here. And since then, my journey has been all about bringing those dreams to life, whether it was my corporate career, working with some of the world's largest companies, helping them become more agile and innovative. Making elephants run, really helping those companies kind of discover how to unlock that startup speed and culture within them. To eventually leaving my corporate career and becoming an entrepreneur and founding multiple companies and building and scaling from the ground up, writing a book and becoming a speaker, and continuing to focus on the one thing that has been the through line in my entire journey, which is reinvention. I've reinvented myself over and over again, and I do exactly that for people and organizations as well.
That's incredible. So, Nikki, you and I have something in common. You wouldn't be able to tell this by looking at me, but my grandfather actually is from India, so I'm half Indian or Pakistani because they went to Pakistan on the after partition. I'm half Filipino. So your word reinvention, I really resonate with that a lot. Part of the reason why is because I had a chance to live in multiple parts of the world, and it's always been about adaptability for me. But my question for you specifically is, in the way of reinvention, what is that energy? Where does that energy come from for you? Is it the experience and the adventure? Is it because of your dreamer type mindset? Where does that energy come from?
That's a great question. I think for me, it's really focusing on the possibilities of the future rather than the fear and uncertainty of the present. I just don't dwell that much on the present challenges. I'm always in the future. In fact, one of the consistent feedback I'd get from my executive coach over the years as in my leadership roles was that you're always in the future. You got to bring your team along, to bridge from where they are to where you want to take them. And I'm just always so excited about what is possible, and that curiosity and that genuine desire to figure out, how can you create the greatest impact? Who do you need to become in order to do that? What skills, what capabilities, what mindset shifts, what habit shifts do you need? That's what excites me. So I just step into, I obsess about the future. I think about the impact that motivates me and inspires me. And then I step into the version of myself that can make that happen. And that's simply put, that's what I've continued to do over and over again.
That's amazing. One of the things I usually tell my mentors or even my kids, is that the future is bigger than your past because it
Mhm.
hasn't happened yet. And there are so many different possibilities. And your past already happened, that door's closed. There's only one way that you can do, looking back. So, in the way of digital transformation, because that is really about the mindset piece of it, how do you think about the leaders you work with respect to transformation? Because again, it's a reinvention of the company, if you will. How do you approach that when you do your work in that space?
Well, first off, I would say it's changed a lot over the last 25 years. In the early years of digital transformation, it was the dot-com transformation or the mobile or cloud, or you take any of those major tech disruptions, there was an awareness by large companies and their leaders that they needed to embrace this technology, that they needed to um, build those capabilities, train their people, shift their way of working and all of that. But like most large organizations, change is not overnight. It takes a while. And so it would be the slow transformation that was episodic, those large scale transformation programs, sometimes, 18 months, sometimes 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. My gosh, if you've done SAP implementation, you know how long those take, right? So, you had the luxury of time. That was the difference because even if you were going through these slow, long transformation programs, you had the time to adapt because the technology wasn't leaving you behind. What's changed today is that you don't have the luxury of taking that kind of time for transformation. And you also cannot do it one time. It cannot be episodic with a start date and an end date. It has to be continuous. It has to be more than just skin deep of implementing a technology. It has to be a fundamental reinvention of what business are you even in? Because this isn't just deploying AI tools and saying nothing else changes. Your business might have to be reinvented. What business are you in? What's your strategy? What's your new competitive mode? In order to make all of those things happen, what kind of operational agility do you need? What does your culture need to become for that to be true? And how do you shift your people, not just, advancing your technology? So it's way deeper, way more sort of, hacking away at the insides of the organization. And it's certainly way faster. And that's not an easy thing to do. It's not only threatening, it's risky, and it's way too big and complex for anyone to take on. So our goal is really about making the complex simpler, making it smaller, making it easier to get out of inertia and start taking the steps forward. Because the worst thing you can do right now is do nothing.
Yeah. That's wow. That's all I could say is wow. In the age that we're in, like you said, when you talk about technology and AI, the entire shift has to change. And I like that piece that you're talking about, a shift change with people. Could you go a little deeper into that about the shift change that organizations need to make from a human level, from a people level?
Yeah, if we compare to previous tech implementations in the past, right? Let's take it whether it was an ERP system or a CRM system, you would have some workflow changes and all of that. But fundamentally, it was here's the technology, let's train the people, and they're going to start doing things differently. Today, what we have is technology that is so revolutionary and so intelligent and so advanced that simply taking that revolutionary tool and force fitting it into a completely obsolete way of working is the wrong approach. It's like putting a Lamborghini engine on a horse carriage. It's not going to change your outcome, right? It's the wrong model. And so, in order for the work to be reimagined, you first have to help people make that shift from who they think themselves of. If you value yourself on hard work and you say, you know what, this is how I've done my job for the last 20 years. Most people go into their everyday work lives somewhat on autopilot, not as a bad thing. It's because it becomes muscle memory, right? Whether you're a marketer or an engineer or operator, you go in with a muscle memory because you've built that experience. You've built a level of craftsmanship and mastery over your job. So you go in and you kind of do that same thing every day. And what we don't have is a pattern interrupt. to say, wait a minute, that's what worked and it made total sense in the past. But if you keep doing the same thing the same way, you're not really leveraging the power of AI. But it's not as simple as saying, stop doing it the old way and start using this new thing. It also requires an identity shift to say, because when you take away 80% of the way someone has done their job, the biggest challenge is not about what do I do with that free time. The biggest challenge is, well, am I even, valued anymore? What am I worth if I'm reduced to just a small percentage of my time and effort? That becomes the real challenge that people start facing is, who am I if I'm not doing what I have been historically valued for and paid for? So the first shift of the people part is the identity and the behavior shifts. And only then that leads to people, really examining what parts do you let go, what parts do you retain, and then you can reinvent their workflows and their processes. And then finally, the third step is introducing the tool. And by the time you do that, now you've got high adoption because there's a true acceptance of AI as your coworker, not just an intern that's going to help you with little things.
Mm. No, I agree with that. Now I'm kind of curious from most companies, are tech companies in a sense.
Sure. Yeah.
You can't operate a business without technology. It just doesn't happen anymore. Like you say, changes have happened. What about that team that's already there, that technology team, the IT team, the CTO, CIO? Are those the people who are supposed to help the business move into AI, or does it really take someone from the outside looking in order to make that change?
I don't think just outsiders can come in and drive that change. Like any organizational change, it has to be, truly sponsored from the very top. And it requires change agents and leaders across the organization to make that happen. But in this case, one of the questions that I've been getting a lot from various companies is, who exactly should lead AI transformation? And you guys are in the business of doing this, so you know this firsthand. But I've been asked that by boards, I've been asked that by CEOs, I've been asked that by various C-level executives. Who exactly is in charge? Because this is not a vertical implementation. This is not something that sits just in IT or just in marketing. It's going horizontal. And it's not just technology that's going horizontal, it's impact and its effect all over it's strategic, not just tactical. And so the question is, who's ultimately the right driver of that? I believe it requires a cross-functional leadership, an executive approach. But if there was one role that I would pick, I would say it's probably the chief operating officer, because this is someone who executes on the strategy of the company and drives the people and culture within that. On the flip side, there's been argument of, should it be the CHRO? And the challenge, while CHROs are responsible for people and culture, many of them are not as technically well versed, because this is at its core a tech capability. The one wrong answer, I would argue, is that it should not sit with IT, because it doesn't lead to the people transformation part as effectively as it.
As a person in tech, I'm a little hurt that you didn't say it was the technology department that should run. I'm a little hurt, but definitely,
Well,
definitely.
I'm saying that because you guys have nailed the tech. We now need to fix the human part. That's why
You're
I'm saying
right.
consider.
You're right. You're 100% right. Like,
Yeah.
without that culture shift, like you said,
Yeah.
and that adoption, you bring something in, no one's gonna wanna use it. No one's gonna, like you say, make it a partner in what they're doing. It's just gonna be this thing that's off to the side that you just threw at me that hopefully I figure it out. So I definitely 100% agree with that.
Well, so I'll give you a very specific situation to think about. When you truly leverage AI in on a with the team that's fully leveraging its capabilities, and let's say they have 60% of their capacity that gets released as a result. 60% is a big number for a team.
Mm.
Where do you redeploy that? Now, you could choose to do more of the same and say, okay, we're just going to, our throughput has increased. So let's just, if we're a sales team, we're just going to, 3x our pipeline or what have you. You could do things. But the alternative is you could also redeploy to something totally new and innovative. That's a strategic question. That's not just a time management issue. That's not a technical issue. That is a strategic question of imagine at an entire company, especially a large enterprise. If 60% of capacity got released, the redeployment and application of that is a very big strategic question, but also huge opportunity. That's like doubling the size of your company with no added headcount. What challenge do you want to take? What market do you want to conquer? What products do you want to, businesses do you want to go into? That's a huge strategic question, and that's why to me it's not a functional area of responsibility. You have to look at it from a very different lens.
So I like the perspective you take, Nikki, and let me ask you something about people who are graduating now and entering the workforce, because to me that's a big
Mhm.
impact to them at this time. And as you think about the role of AI, now I look at AI as an omni-purpose invention or omni-purpose technology. It's something that's just going to be in the background eventually. We won't even talk about it like we talk about it today. But for the people who are, and I'm strictly speaking from the engineering and operational lens because that's the world I live in. A lot of these, I see these junior, fresh graduates out of college. They're not getting the same mentorship or apprenticeship opportunities because there are mid to senior level engineers who can basically do the same thing with the assistance of a AI tool, if you will. How do you see that playing out from a human perspective? Because in my mind, I'm thinking, boy, in 5 years, I won't have a junior workforce that is now skilled enough and had apprenticeship. What does that do to the workplace that I know has that kind of philosophy?
First of all, why don't the three of us go way back to when we were starting out and what that felt like, that first job? For
Yeah.
me, it was so much grunt work. Oh my God. I mean, I started my career in corporate strategy, and it was just, I still remember one of my first memories was, this doing a strategy advisory work for a Fortune 50 company. And my boss took me to this storage room filled with file boxes, right? And it was like every single file box had tons of folders filled with all kinds of spreadsheets and like forms and all kinds of stuff. I kid you not, there were like 30 boxes in that room. And he was like, go analyze that. Um, that to me, certainly built a certain rigor and discipline. And of course, when you're starting out, you just, you're going through the boiler room culture. You just want to prove yourself. I think we're of a generation where that was valued, and the
Mhm.
industriousness and like your tenacity to do that. So the benefit that I see today for people starting out is they don't have to go through 30 file boxes filled with like paperwork and manually do all of that stuff and the grunt work that takes weeks to get to. They have AI as a partner to be able to do that, which means they can shift into things that are higher value work. But is that truly, the place where they'll start out? Because to your point, the loss of apprenticeship is a pretty serious thing. I think that started around the pandemic, where hybrid work caused a loss of apprenticeship, and we've continued to see that. Now we're going to see even more of that play out. What this means for young people is three different skills that you have to double down on. Number one, there's an expectation of AI fluency that even at the earliest career stage, you just have to have. It's not optional anymore because you're entering the workforce with this as that is omnipresent like electricity. You don't get to say, I will do it or not do it. It's not just basic AI training. You have to have deep AI fluency. Number two, you have to identify the areas that are uniquely human that you are gifted with. Everybody has that, and most of the time, you know that from an early age, whether that's relationship skills, communication skills, whatever that might be that you have. Double down on that, hone those skills, and find opportunities where that is leveraged more. And number three, master the meta skill of learning, because you're not going to know everything and things will change faster than you can ever keep up. But unlike previous generations where you could spend 20, 30 years gaining mastery slowly, you don't have that luxury. So instead, master the meta skill of learning so that you're always, able to figure things out as things change. I think if young people have those three as foundational skills, it sets them up for the greatest level of success. From a leadership standpoint, from a company standpoint, what's important is to bring in talent, not with the expectation that they're going to do the grunt work like, previous, that used to exist before, but really think about how might you leverage their fresh, innovative thinking and give them the ability to solve problems with AI as their coworker, but also teach them how to give them the opportunity to learn how to develop greater judgment and wisdom. That's the part that only comes with experience. So give them the opportunity to learn that, because in the absence of that, you're building a talent pipeline that is technically very fluent and completely incapable of applying judgment and discernment in making those decisions.
Yeah. So the meta skill and the meta learning piece of it is where I am also interested in, Nikki. And I can see you spend a great deal of time thinking about this topic. So with respect to meta learning, how do you suggest young people today get into it? Because if I think about my own learning experience, it was very
Mhm.
structured.
Yeah.
And AI is like having a PhD in your pocket on any number of subjects that you can think of. So how do you suggest one goes about that learning skill, and how does it look different, if you will, in the age of AI?
Yeah, well, I'll share sort of my own approach to learning. One is that past our formal education, we often stop having a structured approach. Right? We just learn on the job, or we learn what we need to do for the job, and often we rely on experience and time to develop that mastery. One of the things that has served me well is I've always created sort of a 10-year horizon for um, a structured learning approach. Now, the topics may change because things change so fast, but areas of interest that I'm fascinated about, and just kind of looking at it always 10 years out, of saying what's happening on the horizon. The benefit of looking at it that far out is it takes you into areas that you might otherwise not consider. Because we tend to look at, our sort of development in the context of our jobs, or the next promotion, or the next stage of our career, and you look in like 3-year cycles. Well, 10-year horizon forces you to think about what the future is going to be like. And when you look that far out, in fact, this year I created a 20-year horizon for the first time, because I was like, things are changing so fast. I want to look 20 years out. I have no idea what's going to happen. But that's the exciting part, is that 20 years from now, if I'm still alive and still productive, what are the areas that I'd love to say I spent the last 20 years exploring these topics? And so this is not about having a list of books or podcasts and things like that. It's just areas of interest. And the greatest insights and unique perspectives developed at the intersection. So rather than the depth of each one, it's really looking at the intersection of things that fascinate you. And for me, it was very clear, okay, I'm fascinated by human psychology, or I'm fascinated by neuroscience, or I'm fascinated by technology, or I'm fascinated by leadership. And how do these collide, and what might that look like over time? And what are the specific questions at the intersection that I feel obsessed about, right? Because when you have that clarity, and you have that almost like a vision board of your, mastery plan, right? Like a decade, 2 decade mastery plan. When you have that clarity, what that does is, one, you discover things that your curiosity takes you into learning about things naturally. You're not forcing it like a textbook. Your curiosity leads you into discovering new insights and new topics, but you also meet a lot of people that are kind of within those intersections. And so now your knowledge base and your perspective multiplies exponentially, because it's sort of the neural network of people. Because you're learning through those
Mm.
people, you build those relationships, and there's no greater way to learn than not just the books and the captured knowledge, but also learning from your network. And if that is intentional, because you have a vision for that 10, 20-year horizon of the topics that interest you, you're going to become top of your craft, even without trying. It's just going to happen, because the compounding will take care of the rest. So that's what I would share with people: is don't wait on college and graduate school curriculum and stop there. The world is changing way too fast, but it also requires and demands each of us to bring something unique to the table. And the only way you'll have a unique perspective is when you have a vision of what kind of problems you obsess about and what kinds of topics you're curious about.
There's one thing Renard and I consistently talk about whenever we talk about networks is that you have to build those relationships, especially as leaders
Yeah.
in any organization or aspiring leaders in any organization. And you bring something, and Renard, I'd love for you to chime in with your perspective on this too. Is if I'm going to live in the age of AI where knowledge is at my fingertips and I can talk to and have a conversation with a machine, it almost feels like I need to build a support group of people and tap into that neural network of human beings.
Yeah. Because that's collective intelligence, right?
Yeah.
The difference to me between just relying on artificial intelligence for the knowledge I gain, because it is a great thought partner, no question. I can learn any topic easily today. But the difference between artificial intelligence and collective intelligence is the nuance and the wisdom and the lived experience and the stories that I also get. It contextualizes my learning about the why behind everything, and it becomes more memorable. Throughout human history, we've learned through stories. Religion is stories, right? Everything that has passed on, even before modern society, came from stories. And that's what sticks because that's what we internalize, that's what we incorporate. And that's what collective intelligence of your network makes possible that AI alone does not.
I'm gonna have to agree again with that, and it goes back to my grandfather who passed away years ago, 94 years old, remembered every single thing he did as a kid to an adult, and I sat there and listened to him, and I say, "Man, all that history that he knows personally," and that goes into that human aspect.
Mhm.
We like you said, we do live in this age of now AI, addicts, etc. But I think that human aspect always has to be around. And like you say, the world is built on stories. The books we have are based off stories, regardless if it's a book for a class or just fiction, etc. It's part of our history, and I think that's something we have to keep a hold on, regardless of how advanced we get in AI and all this other things. We have to keep a hold on of the human aspect of what we have in this world. Like you said, I love AI. I use it on a regular basis. I'm sure mostly everybody does in some aspect. Like you say, it's a great helper. It's a great coworker when you need some help. But I think that human aspect of let me have these conversations with you, let me get to know you, improves me fast, very fast. So I think that that's a connection we have to keep a hold on. And now going a little bit back to what you do now, you're the co-founder of FlipWork. If you could give us a day in the life of Nikki and what FlipWork does.
Yeah. So we are really on a mission to solve what I call the exponential divide, where AI is changing work faster than how people can change how they work. We talked about deploying technology without changing the underlying way and the way people think, work, and lead, and that exponential divide, where technology races ahead and people get left behind, is dangerous because not only is it not tapping into our full potential, it also creates a world where we become obsolete and irrelevant. So our mission is simply to close that divide, and the way we do that is what we call agentic human reinvention, which is humans and machines becoming co-evolution partners instead of just a tool that you use. How can you co-evolve with it? How does it amplify what makes you uniquely human, and how does it give you the capability and remove the execution friction that allows you to do more and become exponentially more capable. And what this looks like in practice is that we work with companies that are embarking on AI transformation, which is almost every company right now. And the most common challenge that holds them back is, where do I begin? Because this is such a big challenge and it's so ubiquitous across the org that often the challenge is, there's too much change happening. I don't know where to start, so I'm not going to do anything at all. So we first help them with discovering where to start. And we do that through a proprietary diagnostic assessment, which assesses all of their employees and separately their leaders and executives. That helps us map the organization on a quadrant to figure out where are they in their agentic maturity. Are they just complete laggards? Are they super advanced? And is there a perception gap between where the workers are and where the leaders are? Because that also makes a difference in your ability to transform. So we first start with that because that very quickly helps to identify Where should you focus that gives you the greatest bang for your buck, the fastest ROI, the best adoption, and the evolution of your company? That removes the inertia for leaders to even commit and get started. Once we get that clarity, then from there, we do the work in 90-day sprints. And the reason for the 90-day sprint is not that you're going to change these massive organizations in 90 days, but it starts to build momentum. Because again, success breeds more success. Instead of taking on a 36-month transformation project, we do things in 90 days and bring teams and leaders together in those 90 days, identify high impact use cases, and almost like a capstone project, guide them step by step in terms of what to change, how to think different, what team norms need to change, how does each person's work get redefined, and how do they optimize all of their workflows, and exactly where the agentic tools fit in. So within 90 days, they not only have a formula for the change, but they themselves have shifted the behaviors and the team collaboration approach within that. And only after that is done do we build any bespoke custom AI tools or agents that need to be done within that. By the time we've deployed the actual technology, the adoption is already high because guess what? Everybody's already primed for it. And so that 90-day cycle just continues over and over again, and it starts to have this compounding effect of the culture changing exponentially, because it almost feels like a leaderboard of sorts. You start gamifying that because you start to see, hey, that team's doing so much better. Look at how much capacity they increased, or their results got faster. So other teams start to embrace that change. So instead of change being forced from the top down, this is change that is unlocked from the bottom up and from inside out.
Okay. I'm kind of curious. The companies that you work with, or just the landscape in general, have you seen that certain companies are ready, or just most are like at a even line, saying, "Hey, we have some stuff in, we're not sure. We need you to come in to help us," or do you see any companies that you feel like, okay, you're really ready, you just need a little tweaks here and there?
So the C-suite, I would say, definitely is under a lot of pressure. That is probably the most universal thing I've seen is boards are asking executives, "What's your plan for AI? How are we, leveraging this within the company, within the business?" Teams are embracing AI. Personal use is obviously very, very high, but there's also a lot of shadow use because there's no clear governance, there's no clear protocols in place. So there's a ton of shadow AI happening in general. In terms of industries, I'll admit, like I was surprised because what I thought we would see is a lot of legacy industries kind of be more excited to say, "Wow, this helps us leapfrog ahead." Instead, our biggest demand has come from large tech companies. And you would think like the tech companies are already ahead. And even within industries and within companies, the engineering teams, number one demand. It's not at all what I thought would happen. So I have to admit, like we were very, very surprised at how is it that we keep getting engineering teams and product teams coming first. And also, why do they need that much help? You think they're techies to begin with. But interestingly, we're finding that because so much of, how engineers have gone about building, applying their skills, it is a huge behavior change for them to learn to code differently or be okay with product management differently and all of that. So right now, that's sort of the early adopters that we're seeing. I think the pressure across the board is there, but it's being done more in pilots and some of the other industries versus the large scale adoption in tech.
I'm kind of curious your take on the landscape. I know you say that you focus on the future, of course, and it's a good thing. What does, let's say, the next 10 years look like for us from an AI robotic standpoint? What do you see the norm becoming in a couple of years?
Well, I've been obsessively thinking about what happens 10, 15, 20 years from now. And um my own perspective on this, well, some of it is definitely based on research and data and all of that. But I see a very prosperous future globally. I see the productivity and output across industries, across society being highly exponential just because we have technology and intelligence at our disposal. Robotics would have advanced to the point where the cost of robotics would be affordable enough to deploy it in manufacturing and other places. And of course, AI will have large scale adoption by then and whatnot. The net effect of that is that we're going to see GDP rise significantly, and every nation will be prosperous. Well, what does that look like in practical terms for workers then? If output and GDP increases without the need for humans to be working, and to be the workers that produce that output, it means that we will have more time, and our value gets disassociated from effort and from time. To me, the upside of this future is that we are living in an abundant society. We're not struggling for basic things like food and shelter and education and healthcare. It's a very prosperous society that provides for its citizens all over the place. The downside of that is a life where a person isn't striving, doesn't feel valued, and lacks purpose is a very depressing future unless we find new ways to apply ourselves. So, what could it look like? Maybe it looks like what the Stoics had, move back into philosophy and music and poetry and all of that. It's tapping into more of our creative side versus needing truly moving out of the industrial age, and we're not workers anymore.
Yeah, I it's you're hitting on all the notes that I think about, Nikki, and I don't want to turn this into a conversation that we'll have hours and hours of nonstop discussions on. But to your point about the Stoics and I love the picture you've painted for us, and I think that idealistic view is absolutely necessary for us to remain excited and hopeful about things. But as I think about the way we value ourselves, and I look at performance management, for instance. Let's pick on that for a second. If my value is dependent on my output, for instance, in an organization, that's a very industrial era concept, which most big companies, as we're all aware of, follow today. So what do you suppose happens as you think about this world where democratizing of success is widely rampant? What happens to how we think about performance management, if you have a perspective on it?
Never liked performance management because I've seen it as so outdated of trying to fit a human being on a vector and
Yeah.
rating scale and comparison. But uh, I don't have an answer to that because it's an area that it's not about the philosophically right answer. It's the operationally adopted solution that'll ultimately win out, right? In this, because you're battling against the forces of decades of industrial age management, principles that are so embedded in our culture, that how do you shift from something like that to something radically different? The best solution will be to not have that at all, to get rid of performance management altogether. That if it's really, we go from operators of tools to orchestrators of outcomes, then you should be measured on the outcome and your ability to provide the wisdom, the discernment, the judgment, the context for machines to do all the doing. It moves you into higher level contribution in that. But how do you get measured in that? Um, that is an area I'd love to see how modern management kind of evolves from there. My hope is that it ends up being none of the measurement and actually like a completely different solution of some sort.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's a very fascinating and can be controversial, depending on who the audience is that's listening to it.
Yeah, if the
Um,
CHROs are listening to this,
yeah.
we're in trouble. What do you think about that, by the way? What's your
So
take?
like I find that current performance management philosophies across the board, at least from my experience, is very much rooted in the industrial era. And I don't believe that that's appropriate. We've gone from industrial to information age to now the age of AI. And if I think about it in terms of generations, it is many generations of workers who have come and gone, and we're still finding ourselves using a tool that's practically antiquated. But the expectation is that we will always adopt innovative new ways. And it goes back to, in the way of performance, how do you build that performance in your team? And I'll take a little tangent here for a second. If I look at executive leaders across the board in the Fortune 500, for instance, each of them have an awareness of and access to coaching, as an example. And Renard and I, again, we're beneficiaries of being able to invest in ourselves, and the coaching that we receive has helped us tremendously. But what happens to now a workforce in the lower IC, middle management, who have no awareness or access to coaching? And probably this is, if anybody in that space is listening to this conversation, they'll say, boy, I never even thought about coaching or didn't even know that was a thing. So in my view, there is going to be more of a need for teachers,
Hmm.
and there's going to be more of a need for people who, to be reductive a little bit, people with liberal arts education who understand that critical thinking is not just a science-based methodology, it's actually very much looking across disciplines. And I
Hmm.
think if we, and I buy into your ideal view of the world, I think at some point we'll reach that nirvana, but it has to come from a place where the humanity of it is front and center. And critical thinking, in my view at least, is going to be the driver for that type of conversation. And critical thinking, as most of us are likely aware, the first question you ask is, who does it benefit, whatever it is? And then the conversation goes from there.
And who does it leave behind?
Exactly right. Yeah.
Y'all said it better than I could say. I'm gonna be honest. Y'all said it. I got no rebuttal for that one. I feel the same way. I'm kind of curious. There's another phase. You've been an author as well, and you're a speaker. Why? What made you want to transition also into speaking? You speak at different companies, different events, etc. What made you want to say, "Hey, I want to impact people by speaking at their organizations"?
Mm, I don't think I've ever been asked that question
Oh,
before.
okay.
So good job on that. But I'll tell you how it actually happened in reality. I always had a love of writing since I was in, gosh, elementary, middle school. For as long as I can remember, I was obsessed with. And I've written religiously every single day. Very little of it goes public, but I just write every day. It's just a daily practice. And it wasn't until about 2010 or so, or 2011, where I was starting to get a lot of recognition as an entrepreneur. But more than that, it wasn't about my entrepreneurship success. It was how people looked at me with all these labels. Now, up until then, my self image and my identity was always, oh, I'm just this, ambitious dreamer and high achiever and all those kind of things. I didn't put any other labels on myself. And suddenly I had all these people reaching out to me saying, oh, I'm an immigrant like you. It's so exciting to see you like do all these things. It inspires me and gives me hope. Oh, I'm a non-white female too, and or I'm gay, or I'm short, whatever that is. I check every box of diversity, and suddenly I had all these people from so many diverse segments reaching out to me, just expressing the hope and inspiration and excitement they felt. And it was literally, I kid you not, the first time that I realized that even though that was not my self-image, that all these labels and categories through the lenses through which other people looked at me was a source of positive impact overall. And that's what led me to not just write privately, but turn those words into words of inspiration and speaking. And it just led into a speaking career worldwide. And it truly came from just recognizing that the one of the most scalable ways of impact is stories and strategies that you share.
Inspirational. I will tell you, Amir, there Nikki did go to where I work. So she was there and I missed that. And we were communicating. We was like, hey, we're gonna meet up. And I was so upset I didn't get to see her live in person. But everybody at work told me they were so inspired by her in that day. So I'm not missing again. If she ever comes
I'll tell you one of the coolest things that happened at that event is that I had one guy, actually two people from the audience kept taking pictures of my shoes. And like there was a whole series of pictures that were about my shoes. And like, it was like perfectly coordinated sneakers with my suit and all of that stuff. And I was like, wow, who knew that I'm getting like some serious street cred as a sneakerhead now?
Yeah, I like that. I like that. I used to be one. Not anymore. But I love that. I think it's always cool. It gives another talking piece for someone
Yeah.
who's up on stage. So I do like that. And
Yeah.
and definitely, I know we're getting close to time, and I always ask every guest, "What's your theme music?" The theme music get you ready for the day, get you ready, maybe get you ready for on stage or going somewhere. What do you listen to? What's your theme music?
This girl is on fire.
Oh,
That's been my song. It's been my stage entry song for a long time.
I love it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
love it.
no,
Why that song in particular? I'm curious.
I think it's got the right beat when you're going onto stage because I'm a very animated speaker. I do not like being behind a podium or reading notes or using a static mic or something. I move a lot on stage, and like I want to start off with that high energy right off the bat. And so this just has the right note to go on, but it also kind of sets the tone of what to expect in that. So it's totally my song.
I love it. I love it. Nikki, we have to thank you for joining us on Black Belts and Boardrooms. It has definitely been a masterclass for us. I think we could have talked for at least 2 hours easy, just hearing how I feel in Amir. I think you've inspired us as well. So just being on here. So we thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you guys for having me. This was such a great conversation because it's clear we're all thinking about the same kind of topics that impact the future of humanity and how society evolves, even as technologists. So I'm thrilled I got a chance to have this conversation with you. Thanks for having me.
Oh man, what a way to end the week, Amir. That's all I'm gonna say. And to our Black Belts and Boardrooms audience, we will see you on the next one.